Welcome to Legacy and Leadership. I'm David McKean. Join me as we talk to leaders in their field regarding their thoughts on leaving a legacy and impact in their families and in their community. Whether it's the military or whether it's law enforcement, it seems from my outside perspective that rank and a lot of respect goes with rank, right? So if you're under a terrible leader, how have you navigated that personally and professionally?
Again, by calling them out on bad decisions in a respectful way, but you have to have the facts to do that. And there were a couple of them at Montgomery Police Department and it wasn't just us. The entire department had issues with them, and the higher ups knew they were a problem, but they were high ranking enough where we knew nothing was going to be done, and but standing up and challenging those people who make those bad decisions is, I think, part of what a leader's supposed to do, regardless of what your rank is. I would do it as a slick sleeve if I knew I was right. One of my favorite sayings is, if I'm wrong, I'll stand up and admit I'm wrong, and we'll move forward. But if I'm right, I'll stand there and fight that wall. I will not back down if I know I'm right.
Yeah,
that's just my personality.
Yeah, a lot of conviction there.
Yeah,
yeah, that's great. When did you first recognize that you were a leader?
I never really thought of it, in that sense, but I would say it was when I started working narcotics with the police department. I was very, very driven. I thought that's all there was to the world, was locking up bad guys and chasing drug dealers. And what I noticed, I think because I was so driven to be successful in that role, and 'cause I didn't have rank at that time, but it was a matter of, like I said, identifying people's skills and talents within that unit. And we became very successful. It had the most successful narcotics team in the Southeast. And people, we're splitting teams, and I noticed people started wanting to migrate to my team. And that would have been 1994, 1993, 94. We were just knocking heads off, with seizures and drug seizures, cash seizures. And I want to say that in 1 year we had over 360 arrests of drug traffickers.
My goodness.
And that was that, I guess. And again, it's teamwork. One person can't do it, but because of those stats, I made Officer of the Year with Mobile PD based on those stats, and I was a slick sleeve, but I had people who chose to follow me because I would watch. There was one person who was really good at writing warrants. You can give them the information, they spit it out like that. That was pre-cell phone, so and we had beepers, and we were fortunate to have those. And then identified other people who were really good at surveillance. And that was always one of my favorite things to do. And then other people who were really good at interviewing. And so you watch that by listening, not talking, and then bring them onto that team, and then you got a real successful unit because each person has their skill set. And when you meld all that together, it creates success.
I would imagine, with 40 plus years of leadership in various capacities, that you've maybe encountered a coworker or a teammate that you saw something in them that maybe they didn't see in themselves. Can you maybe talk about, as a leader, how you draw that out and give them confidence?
I have had a couple of situations like that, and the best way to do it is to sit them down and talk with them and make it hard for them. You push them and then it's either going to make them or break them.
Right.
But you also have to, provide the tools necessary, to make them successful. And so I would say, the times I've had to do that, you put them in a leadership role that they're uncomfortable with, and let their coworkers push them, especially some who may be more knowledgeable about, the role that they're in. And because believe it or not, there are still a lot of people today that are great leaders, but never have a desire to have rank because they like working.
Right.
And so it's all about just identifying, listening, and pushing people to get the best out of them.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, with 36, 37 years in law enforcement, I would imagine you've seen things change dramatically over that time period. Can you maybe talk about that evolution a little bit?
Well, again, the number one thing I'd have to say is technology.
Yeah.
And when I started, there were no such thing. Actually, when I started, there was not even a pager. so and then you got pagers, then you got bag phones, which evolved into smaller cell phones, and then actually there wasn't even computers then. Certainly not laptops. And so that has really changed. Technology has changed how law enforcement, is run nowadays, and the things that you can do with technology, solves crimes a lot faster. But it does not replace going door to door, knocking, talking to people. Right. You can never replace that human element of having a conversation with a witness or a victim. And so sometimes I've seen cases, not just with our agency, but other agencies, where people are too reliant on technology. And there have been times I've had to say, get your butt out of the office, go start knocking on some doors. You're not going to solve it sitting behind a computer.
So would you say as a whole that technology has made things easier or more difficult? Because from my perspective, it's a double-edged sword.
It is. For old people like me, it's more difficult. So, I can do some very basic things with computers, but it certainly made the job a lot easier. The information is available, even just open source information makes things faster. And now with AI being available, and I still don't quite understand all that. But you can use the assistance of AI to help point you in the right direction on certain details, and even some verbiage in search warrants and things like that. And so it's been a game changer.
From my outsider perspective, it seems over the last 10 years, really in particular, that the political heat has been turned up in the law enforcement community in this country.
Yes.
Would you say that's a fair assessment?
It's a fair assessment, but we've not experienced that problem down here. And so that was a large discussion, when I went to the FBI National Academy. You're with law enforcement leaders around the world. And so we just don't have those problems down here. And I was in the class with some of those who had experienced those problems. One of my classmates, and actually a suite mate, was from the St. Louis area, and class started the week after the Michael Brown thing in Ferguson. So, and he was part of that investigation early on. So, and then we got to see real-time updates on the riots, and he was always on the phone with his chief. And
I'm sure.
So I think we're just really, really fortunate. We just don't have those problems, in the Southeast.
Do you have any opinions as to why that heat has been turned up? Has it been turned up because of the technology and the cameras that these officers wear now, or do you think it's the political discourse? What in your opinion?
I would say it's the political discourse, and there are some agencies that could do better with transparency. Again, like I said, if you mess up, say you messed up.
Right.
But if you didn't, get the information out right away. Stand behind your people always, because everybody makes mistakes. But the political discourse, I don't quite understand it. I don't understand that mentality.
Right.
With the defund the police and the riots and all that. That is a result of either an agency or administration, be it city or a county administration, not standing behind their department and not allowing them to do their job. That kind of stuff can be shut down pretty quickly if you got the backing of the administration to do it.
Is that the reason, if you had to pick one or two things, why as you mentioned earlier, we haven't had those types of problems here locally? Is the administration and the local politicians and law enforcement all working together?
It is, and that has to happen for any agency to be successful. And we do have a really strong relationship with our city, county government, our state legislators, and that's statewide. And but you also have to sometimes understand you have to support their ideas too, even if you might not like them.
Right.
But if it makes sense, you have to support it,
Right.
and if you expect the same in return.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that didn't just come natural to you. It's something that you have to constantly work at, and there's a give and take in that.
There's always a give and take, especially again because everybody, I focus pretty much solely on law enforcement. Let's say a legislator, they've got to focus on law enforcement, building roads, different projects around the state, and so you have to be able to understand that they have a broader, scope of what they're trying to do, and not just law enforcement. Sometimes, again, it's a selfish thing. Law enforcement's all I care about.
Right.
Protecting
Right.
our community.
Right.
And so I always want a larger piece of the pie.
Sure. Sure. No, that makes sense. How do you show up as a leader amidst the face of fear and loss of life in law enforcement?
That's something I've dealt with at an early age. There was a couple of Seabees who were killed. One overseas and one while we're stationed in Virginia, and within feet from me. So you got to see those things. I got to see that at an early age. And then aside from being so passionate about narcotics, I was also the same about working homicides. So at a very, very early age, I worked homicide cases, and you just learn to work through that. And I don't want to sound cold by saying you just kind of get immune to seeing dead bodies and stuff, except for babies. That no matter how long you've done it, that still gets me every time. So, but you have to stand strong. But you also don't be afraid to show that a scene tell that a scene upset you. And make sure your coworkers have what they need to be able to cope with that. Working homicide is not for everybody. We've had investigators, that was their dream job, what they wanted to do until they had to do it, and they lasted a couple months. They wanted out.
Right.
There's one guy who was probably one of the best burglary detectives we've ever had. He wanted to try a hand at homicide. He lasted about 2 months, and he just got out of law enforcement altogether.
My word,
so,
did him in.
Yeah.
Wow. You mentioned that you were involved in an incident because you're out in the field earlier. 36, 37 years later, do you still get that
Oh yeah.
that high heartbeat when you see something going on?
I do, and and again, I don't share this a lot, but but it goes to being out there with your coworkers. Years ago, I was with the sheriff's office, and I was at my in-service training. I was a sergeant, and my narcotics team was out on a surveillance. Well, I took my lunch hour to go check on them, make sure they had everything we need. They were watching a car that had drugs and guns and all that in a local housing area. And within 10 minutes of being there just to check on my guys or leave them so they go to the bathroom, whatever, I ended up in a shooting. And I should have gone to Burger King. But again, it's just being out there with your people. And that's something that's not learned. That's just something that has to be in you.
You answered my next question, right? I mean, where does that come from? Because so many people can't deal with their life being put on the line or rushing into a crowded building where there is danger, right? And so you think that that's innate in you, it's born in you, and that's what you were created to do.
I do feel that way. And because I knew at a very early age, that's what I wanted to do is a law enforcement career. And but that particular incident really shaped a lot of people. One officer got out of law enforcement. Within, I'd say, a couple of minutes, we were surrounded by 300 people.
Wow.
Trying to take, the bad guy's gun that he had. And so I'm having to stand on top of that gun, fighting people so they didn't take it and say he didn't have a gun.
Right.
So there were probably 5 of us holding off 300 people till help got there. And so
My goodness.
that's, again.
And those were people in the community.
Yes, who were very angry, and it was a housing project. And so, the only thing, fortunately, having been not in that particular type situation, but situations where there were gunfire and those kind of things, being calm and being able to give instructions and helps them remain calm. Because it got to the point, I could see more people coming. I just said, all right, everybody grab your shotguns, form a circle, and let's hold them off till the help gets here. And so, we were fortunate that, none of us were hurt.
Right.
But they saw that, again, I stood there with them until it was done, until help got there.
Absolutely. What are some of the current top of mind priorities that you have in the Sheriff's Department currently as the sheriff?
My top priority, when I was first elected until still to this day, is I want law enforcement in every single school in Mobile County. There are 90 schools, public schools in Mobile County.
Okay.
And we were fortunate to partner with the school system, right after I got elected. And they're the funding source for that. County Commission fronts it, they reimburse.
Okay.
But protecting our children is a top priority of mine. And we initially agreed to put hire 12 deputies to serve the 12 high schools in Mobile County, and they trickle down through the middle school and elementary schools that feed those high schools. That's just not enough for me. I mean, I think we need them in at least every high school and middle school.
Wow.
And just one incident can devastate a community. And so and we've already encountered several guns that were, intercepted trying to come into the school. And just protection of those kids are my top priority.
Yeah.
We also built our Internet Crimes Against Children unit, and it started out years ago with just a collateral assignment with the FBI, and we unfortunately saw such a need that we built a unit, and I could double the size of that unit and still not get all these child predators that are online.
Really?
It's really sickening to know, how many early last month, and they've only been a unit for 2 years. They hit over 500 arrests in a 2-year period, and these are online predators.
Your unit?
Just my unit, yeah.
And how many people are in that unit?
5.
My word, that is disturbing.
So it's, I don't want to get into the technology that's involved in that, but we are, when we first started, we really were only able to intercept those where there was an imminent chance of a meeting, and now that's about where we can, hope capture them before that it gets to that point. But there's a lot more sick people out here than what.
And that's just in Mobile County.
That's just in Mobile County.
So going back to what you said earlier, you've got 12 in the high schools. If you were to go into the middle schools, how many more staff, for lack of a better word?
There were probably, I think I would have to hire another, I don't have that number off the top of my head, but I think there are, 16, 18 middle schools.
Okay.
And again,
So more than double.
the school system has the money.
Okay.
And so, because that's all it's really about is money. I mean, if I had the funding, I can hire the deputies. We're fully staffed and have been for some time, and not many agencies can say that. And I think it is because we're all one big family here. And so, but as long as we have the funding, I can hire the deputies for whatever position.
There's an individual, ex-Navy SEAL, who is running for political office in the state of Alabama, Jared Hudson.
Yeah.
And it's my understanding that he's a part of a nonprofit that helps local law enforcement around Alabama with those online child predators. Have you had any interaction with his organization, or
not his organization, but I've talked with him several times.
Yeah. I actually have an old college buddy who has gone on several of those stings, if you will. So it's just shocking, quite frankly, and also just scary.
Yeah,
it's scary.
like I said, just you'd never know there were that many people out there doing those kind of things.
Yeah,
and I didn't know until we started.
Absolutely. There is an election here in Mobile County coming up. Is there anything that you'd like to say to our audience in advance of that?
Well, just take the time to research each candidate, whether it's for the sheriff's office or any office. And I will say all the time, I'll never go negative. I run on my record. Right. I wish my opponent would do the same. Yeah. But take the time to dig a little deeper and talk to deputies, sure. Or like I said, or whatever candidate was running for.
Right.
Talk with their coworkers, talk with their friends, and I encourage the public talk with our deputies. Sure. Because they'll give you the real scoop on what it's like working here.
Absolutely.
And my dedication to serving the community.
Absolutely. Well, we're grateful for your hard work and your dedication to our community and to your full intent of making our community safer. So thank you for that. Yeah. So sincerely appreciate it.
I enjoy it, and I have the luxury of I could have retired several years ago, but I truly enjoy what I do each and every morning. And I kind of make light of when I talk at different things. I said the first two things I do when my feet hit the ground in the morning, number one, I read the verse of the day. Secondly, I look at my jail population. Either one can determine how the day goes.
Oh, my goodness. I sincerely hope you were able to grab a few nuggets from today's conversation that you can implement in your day-to-day life. Please know that we are constantly looking to improve this show. So if you have any ideas or suggestions, please feel free to send those to us. Thank you for watching.